call to order this meeting of the Oversight Committee. It is now, 9:02, 9:04 a.m. Before we start the agenda, I want to remind you that you should keep your microphone on mute unless you are speaking. Please leave your cameras on for the entire meeting so that we can see that we have a quorum. Moving on to roll call, Dr. Cummings, please proceed.
Good morning. When I say your name, please say aye or here. Mr. Margot.
Here.
Dr. Hernandez. Mr. Montgomery.
Here.
Dr. Patel. Ms. Payne.
Here.
Dr. Rice.
Here.
Dr. Rosenfeld.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Members, you have the draft minutes from the May 19th Oversight Committee meeting in your agenda packet behind tab 1. Are there any corrections to the minutes as circulated? Hearing none, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the May 19th Oversight Committee.
So moved. Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion carries. Our next agenda item is public comment. Texans created CPRIT. Opening our meetings with public comment underscores this board's commitment to transparency and accountability. Ms. Doyle, has CPRIT received any requests to provide public comment?
We don't have any requests for public comment.
Mr. Roberts will provide the Chief Executive Officer's report.
The substantive items of my report are included in the memo behind tab 2. I will point out that going into this meeting, we have nearly $175 million available in 21 appropriations for awards. So there are sufficient funds today to cover the awards if you approve them. This will leave us a balance for awards on August 31st of just a little under $35 million. The other item I'd like to call to your attention to is on page 22. The stellar recruits brought to Texas since 2007. We've been tracking these. As of today, we have 241 recruits that CPRIT has brought to Texas since its inception. We have 12 awards pending your approval today. So if these potential recruits accept their awards, we will go over 250 recruits that we brought to Texas. Using a model developed by Dr. Rice, this represents over 6,400 future research years brought to the state of Texas by our academic research program. I think this is a milestone worth noting, is a credit to all of our chief scientific officers and to the agency. And I think that the impact these individuals are having on our institutions of higher education are obvious. With that, Mr. Margot, I'll try and answer any questions you folks may have. If not, that concludes my report.
Are there any questions for Mr. Roberts? Okay. The chair recognizes Mr. Burgess to present the Chief Compliance Officer's report.
Good morning, Mr. Margot. You'll find my compliance officer report and update behind tab 3 in your booklet. Just to highlight a couple of areas in the report, and I'll be happy to answer questions about anything in the report. But I wanted to highlight, one of the areas of compliance monitoring is the financial status reporting. And we, as grant compliance staff, have a second level review. As you are aware, financial status reports are due on a quarterly basis. And the compliance team does a second review of those. And over the last 3 months, we did just shy of 500 reviews, totaling about $57 million. And of those, about 7% required resubmission. And so what we do is we work with the grant accountant staff and the grantee to correct any documentation errors and resubmit that. Another area that I had mentioned back in May is we started a match expenditure review. So product development grantees and academic research grantees that whose indirect cost rate doesn't fully offset the match, they're required to submit expenses on an annual basis to CPRIT. And this past year, we began monitoring that and testing that 100%. And so in FY21, we reviewed a little over $14 million in match expenses and have identified about $1.1 million in disallowed match. And at a very high level, one grantee attempted to submit match expenses prior to the start date of the grant. Another grantee attempted to use this match remodeling their offices. And so those are expenses that we would not allow. So we caught that. What a great team I've got. The last 3 months have been super busy in terms of training and support for our grantees. We conducted 4 new authorized signing official trainings. And so when and that's sort of the main contact for a grant, the authorized signing official. And so we have a specific training they go through to orient them to the CGMS system, our grants management system, and timelines for documentation. We had 4 of those trainings. We had 2 new grantee trainings, Barricade Therapeutics and A&M Corpus Christi. And then we had our second series of annual trainings for our grantee staff. We had about 180 staff attend that training. And on page 3-3 at the bottom there, just wanted to highlight very quickly our grantee risk assessment and FY22 monitoring plan. And to be clear, this is very separate from our internal auditor and their risk assessment that they do. This is very specific to our grantees. And we have the 3 factors that we're considering when we determine risk: and financial exposure, entity maturity, and prior experience. And on the 3-4, we can go into that a little bit more detail. But the risk assessment assigns a priority ranking, and that just really assists us in how to best monitor and support the grantee over the coming year. So on 3-4, you can see the risk factors, the weighting of those factors, the criteria. This was developed several years ago by Weaver, actually, at our initial, I think 2015. We have tweaked it very little over the years. We have made some tweaks, but it's been a very good, solid process for us, and it really allows us year over year to compare apples to apples and how a grantee is performing. Typically in August, I would have more details. There was some delay in getting the data out of our CGMS system, and so I typically would provide actual rankings to you. I don't have that for you today. I can definitely share that with you in November. Mr. Margot, that concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Mr. Burgess?
Yes, if
Mr.
I
Montgomery?
may. Mr. Burgess, I'm just curious, the new undertaking you got involved in, where you went back and looked and checked, 100% of grants, and you found a couple that were before the start date, unauthorized expenses. Does that give you any, if that's a new effort, does it give you any concern that in the past, before that effort was undertaken, that we may have missed things?
We don't look in the past. No,
We don't want to uncover all that stuff.
Yeah, I think there was, we did do a sampling of match expenses during our on-site reviews. And so we were able to catch part of that. There were a couple of ad hoc reviews we performed back in 2020 that caused us to just reconsider whether this would be a good use of our time and energy. And we feel like to date it has been a positive, compliance monitoring.
Yeah, it sounds like it's been terrific. I'm not suggesting you go back and, look at every grant we ever made or anything. I just was curious.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, sure, no problem. Thank you very much, Mr. Burgess. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Any other questions for Mr. Burgess? All right, then turning to the certification of award slates that we will consider today, Mr. Burgess will provide the compliance certification report for the academic research, prevention, and product development research awards.
Thank you again, Mr. Margot. The compliance certification was provided to you in your proposed grant award booklet, and I believe that's on page 108. The memo is dated August the 4th, made available to you in the OC portal. My compliance certification provides details each step in the application review process, beginning with approval of the RFA through the program integration committee meeting that I attend. Central to our process is the compliance pedigree, and this pedigree records each individual step in the grant award process, again, beginning with approval of the RFA all the way through. We finish this out after the OC committee approval. And depending on, excuse me, depending on the program, the pedigree can identify anywhere between 50 to 60 plus unique steps in the award process. We cover pre-receipt, referral and assignment, peer review, the scientific review council meetings, the PIC, and finally the oversight committee approval. As part of my certification, I review quite a bit of supporting documentation, especially on days like today when we have quite a few awards for your consideration. We have, again, the compliance pedigree for each application. We have the third-party observer reports. Those are contracted independent third party that attends each peer review and provides a report to me. We confirm the attendance sheets match the post-review statements, match what the review council chair says, the program officer memos. So it's a very complex mosaic that comes together. In addition to the support documentation, I attended the program integration committee on August the 3rd and confirmed that process followed our administrative rules and statute. After much consultation with CPRIT staff and GDIT, that's our third-party grants administrator, I'm satisfied that the application review process that resulted in the mechanisms recommended by the PIC for your consideration today for the academic research grants, the product development research grants, and the prevention grants followed CPRIT's administrative rules. And I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Are there any questions for Mr. Burgess? Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
The chair now recognizes Dr. Wilson to provide the academic research program update and introduce the program integration committee's grant award recommendations.
The Chief Scientific Officer report has two components. The first will be to report on the Program Integration Committee's recommendation for the second cycle of this past year, RFAs, and the fourth quarter scholar nominations. These are found beginning on page 6 of the proposed grant award packet. And then following your consideration of these recommendations, I will report on requests for funding announcements for the coming year. Next slide, please, Dr. Moore. As you see on page 6, table 1 summarizes the 62 awards and 103, 416, 100,000 in recommendations. You'll note that these come from 8 different grant mechanisms, and I'll be talking a little more detail about 3 new grant mechanisms: the Clinical Trials Network Award, the Texas Clinical Trials Participation Award, and the Texas Regional Excellence in Cancer Award. Next slide. Notable is that these 62 awards span 20 institutions across the state of Texas, attesting to the breadth of the impact that these RFAs are having on cancer research in Texas. I'll note that there are several new institutions on this list: Southern Methodist, UT Rio Grande Valley, to name 2. Next slide. The first mechanism I want to introduce are recommendations for the new Texas Regional Excellence in Cancer Award. We call this the TREC Award. It's an award that can be up to $6 million over 5 years. It is designed to strengthen the cancer research at institutions located in regions of Texas that historically have had low levels of peer-reviewed cancer research funding. It specifically supports program leadership, mentorship of new cancer investigators, investigator-initiated research projects from these new investigators, recruitment and research infrastructure. 2 awards are recommended. The first is the Texas Tech University Health Science Center. This award, Texas Regional Excellence in Cancer Developmental Therapeutics at Texas Tech University Health Science Center, is led by Charles Pat Reynolds. And I want to point out that this TREC Award builds on CPRIT and institutional core resources that have been invested in the last several years to establish a drug development program under Dr. Reynolds' leadership. And the TREC will support integration of these and further development and notable new faculty research initiatives at the Lubbock, Amarillo, and Abilene campuses of the Health Science Center. The second award is to the University of Texas at El Paso, Partnership for Hispanic Cancer Disparities Research. It's actually a partnership between UTEP and MD Anderson, led by Dr. Mark Cox. Notable is that this TREC Award will build on a very important investment that UTEP has made in building the research infrastructure, a new basic science and health science building that's recently been inaugurated on their campus, and then a recent award from the NIH on UTEP Border Biomedical Research Center, which will provide important resources for building, supporting disparities research among the Hispanic community that's served by this institution. Next slide. Reports on 12 recommended core facility support grants. This is a $43 million investment in continuing CPRIT's quite remarkable investment in the research capabilities at Texas institutions. And there's 12 that I'll briefly mention. The first 4 are shown in this slide. The first to Baylor College of Medicine for a proteomics and metallomics core facility, which in the past has had real impact, bringing up to $74 million in new grants to investigators in the Texas Medical Center. Award to University of Texas at San Antonio, which is investing in a drug development program that in the past has supported 20 lead candidate identification, $34 million in new grant resources to the San Antonio institutions. An award to the University of Texas at Austin for continuing their therapeutic drug discovery and development program, which is a component of the Gulf Coast Consortium that brings together both the UT Austin campus as well as Texas Medical Center institutions in identifying new drug opportunities. Again, impact in the past several years of $51 million of new grant resources that have been enabled by access to this core facility. These three are second renewal awards. The fourth is to Texas A&M Health Science Center, their Houston campus, and it's a rather unique shared resource that will be supporting the Gulf Coast Consortium's drug development effort in providing access to in vitro evaluations of new therapeutics for trying to pinpoint potential toxicity liabilities, as well as early signs of targeted efficacy, as opposed to the traditional approach, which is quite time-consuming in animal models. This program will provide access to a much higher throughput discrimination using novel approaches to in vitro therapeutic evaluation. The next slide include a recommendation of a new core facility support to Rice University. I believe that this is the first CPRIT core recommendation to Rice. It builds on their investment in synthetic engineering and is led by Dr. Gong Bo, who was a CPRIT established investigator who will bring to the Texas Medical Center an industrial style robotic liquid handling capability for performing what is very labor intensive efforts to introduce nucleic acids, DNA and the like into cells and viruses for such things as cellular therapy, virus therapeutic development, vaccine development. The next award is recommended to University of Texas Rio Grande Valley. This award will support basic cancer research at the Rio Grande Valley, at UT Rio Grande Valley, and specifically supports two pieces of major equipment, a PET CT imager and high-end imaging flow cytometer. The next award to UT Health Science Center San Antonio will enable the significant upgrade of that institution's flow cytometry shared resource. This upgrade is very important to continuing the trajectory of cancer research that has been going on in San Antonio, much of which has been supported by CPRIT. And next is an award to UT Southwestern Medical Center for a very high-end small animal imaging core facility, which promises to serve multiple institutions in the North Texas region. Again, notable in that it's led by a CPRIT established investigator, Dr. Ankel Henning. And the final four awards in the next slide for core facility support include a recommendation for Texas Tech University Health Science Center Dallas campus to support its clinical pharmacology core, and a recommendation to a new award to the University of Texas Health Science Center at Houston. I'll take a minute to provide a little more background on this interesting resource. It's dedicated to the preclinical development of large molecule therapeutics. And by large molecule therapeutics, we're talking about primarily antibodies for therapeutics and diagnostic purposes. It builds on the increasing importance of antibody development as a cancer therapeutic tool, as well as diagnostic tool, and a very unique opportunity to do essentially the preclinical testing scale up of these antibodies, a resource that's not immediately available and promises to have real impact. Next is a recommendation for an award to Baylor College of Medicine. This is supporting a core facility dedicated to childhood cancer, and it's a renewal of the Adolescent Childhood Cancer Epidemiology and Susceptibility Service, providing important infrastructure across the state of Texas to biobank tissues and genetics samples from new childhood cancer individuals as well as their families, and to pair this with epidemiologic and other data in the promise that this type of information will help inform understanding better the relationships between epidemiology, environment, and genetics in the development of childhood cancers. And then finally, but certainly not least, is the award to the University of Texas Medical Branch at Galveston. This award will support interesting group of investigators at Galveston who provide access to analytical tools for interrogating large data sets, such as the Texas Cancer Registry and the Texas component of Medicare and Medicare support. These are important tools for comparative effectiveness research and really enable investigators in this space access to data sets which are essentially impossible to access without this kind of expertise. We'll go to the next slide. And this is a recommendation for 5 early clinical investigator recipients. Recall that the early clinical investigator award was instituted last year, and this is the second iteration designed to protect time of clinical from clinical responsibilities so that new clinical investigators aspiring to build a career in clinical research have the opportunity to do so. You can see the 5 individuals that are recommended here, 2 from MD Anderson, 1 each from UT Southwestern, Health Science Center San Antonio, and UT Austin. Next slide shows recommendation for a new academic research RFA, the Clinical Trials Network Award. This mechanism was developed to leverage the clinical trial infrastructure and clinical trial portfolio of Texas cancer centers to help them and to stimulate them to develop a network of cancer care facilities that could take advantage of their clinical trials and impact on populations that have limited access to clinical studies. One award is recommended to MD Anderson, led by Dr. Michael Overman. And as you may recall, this award is really an experiment, if you will, in trying to identify ways to more effectively move the resources of major cancer centers to impact in greater sense into a larger community. And so it's awarded in 2 stages. The first stage is affiliates at Lyndon Johnson Hospital in Harris County, a major investment in oncology care in underserved populations, and the University of Texas Medical Branch in Galveston. When these sites are on board and demonstrated to be effectively working, a second stage will be implemented involving partnerships with the University of Texas at Tyler and the Del Seaton Medical Center, Austin. Next slide is another new RFA mechanism, the Texas Clinical Trials Participation Program. You may recall that this program has been enabled by legislation championed by Representative Tan Parker, targeting the understanding that one of the limitations in participating in cancer clinical trials is the increased non-clinical out-of-pocket expenses associated with travel, lodging, meals, etc. And 2 awards are being recommended here, one to Baylor College of Medicine, led by Dr. Martha Mims, and a second to UT Southwestern Medical Center, led by Dr. David Gerber. And the idea here is to help defray some of these expenses in individuals who are enrolled in clinical trials. And importantly, while the majority of the funds are being dedicated to defraying these expenses, each of these programs have evaluation components that will help teach us how to do this very important task better. Next slide. The High Impact, High Risk Award, as you'll recall, has been a continuing investment of CPRIT in relatively, if you will, considering the grants that you've heard about to date, $250,000 over 2 years, essentially seed award to help stimulate new investigators interested in cancer. And the impact of this award has been quite substantial, bringing in a breadth of new institutions across the state, but also in tracking the impact. Nearly a quarter of these high impact, high risk awards go on to significant peer review funding, which is of course the goal. Today, the PIC is bringing to you recommendations for 28 awards to 17 different institutions, and they're listed here. Next slide. Well, I'm moving now to the scholar recommendations. There are two mechanisms being recommended this quarter. The first are two recruitment of rising stars. These are individuals who have proven that they have a trajectory of excellence and promise. The first is to Methodist Hospital Research Institute to recruit Dr. Yang Liu from Wake Forest. He's a cancer immunologist with a very significant portfolio of research interest in overcoming adoptive immune cell therapy resistance, and he'll focus on hepatocellular cancer when he gets to Texas. And the second is to Dr. Tian Zhang. She is a clinical trialist expert in the management of renal cell cancer and will join UT Southwestern from Duke, promising to help further translate the discoveries from the UT Southwestern Kidney Cancer Specialized Program. And I'll note that she's a clinical trialist, that is an investigator who is in the clinics helping to move research impact, the impact on patients. And the next slide shows 10 first-time tenure track individuals who are being recommended. You'll note that the merit scores assigned by our Scientific Review Council reviews indicate the real enthusiasm for this group. 4 ranked a perfect score of 1, and the others not too far behind. I want to mention that that as Mr. Roberts mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, this represents now exceeding 250 recruits to Texas. This past year has been particularly important milestone because, as you know, there's been tremendous economic stress on the research and health science center institutions. And importantly, CPRIT has played a big role in helping these institutions continue the momentum of recruitment. These 12, if you approve them, will bring to 35 the scholar recruitments recommended this year. And notable, 42% of these 35 are women, and a quarter, 25%, are MD physician scientists. So a significant diversity as well as impact. Ms. Margot, that completes the 62 grant recommendations, and be pleased to answer any questions if the group has any.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson. Before we begin, let me note that Dr. Patel and Dr. Hernandez have joined the meeting. Are there any questions for Dr. Wilson?
No question.
Craig?
Excellent presentation, Jim. One quick question. For the core facilities,
How are they evaluated on terms of, did they succeed in fulfilling their mission?
Yes, very important question, particularly as you'll note, several of these are renewals. CPRIT explicitly asked our review committees to assess the core facilities on impact. Simply providing a cost efficiency is not a sufficient reason for renewal, but impact is, and particularly the development of new capabilities. As all of you appreciate, the technology associated with cancer research moves quite quickly, and the successful cores are moving that technology forward and need the CPRIT investment along with institutional investment. And as specific measures for that impact, the breadth of cancer investigators served, the number of publications, patents, and new research grants that are awarded are important criteria that are tracked and evaluated at the time. And I mentioned during the presentation for the renewal recommendations, some of the really quite impressive impact in terms of new grant awards that have come into Texas enabled by access to these core facilities.
Is licensing and commercialization a factor in evaluating their success?
Licensing specifically has not been a mechanism that's followed. However, patents and the like are, and I think you appreciate from the characteristics of many of these cores, what they're actually doing is setting up the translation of basic discovery into therapeutics, diagnostics, and moving them closer to the commercialization space. And I think that your question raises one of the opportunities that the University Advisory Committee, and I believe also the Product Development Advisory Committees have recognized in looking for ways to further take advantage of what is really quite a remarkable investment and impact that could actually affect further the opportunity to bring discoveries from Texas institutions further into the commercialized space.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Dr. Patel, did you have a question?
Yes, Jim. Thank you very much for the presentation. Jim, while understanding that there is need to equitably distribute the grants across the state of Texas, but when I look at the core grant awards and then I look at the Texas clinical trials participation, particularly looking at drug development and innovation, and do these groups who have similar interests collaborate with each other, number one, and number two, is this drug innovation being translated into the clinical trials participation? If not, how should one do that?
Yes, so two important questions. The first is, yes, there's considerable amount of interaction across the core facilities. I've tried to emphasize some of that in particularly the Gulf Coast Consortium, which represents several recommended awards today, where the cores are actually not serving the single institution, but multiple institutions. The access program that is being recommended for renewal brings together pediatric programs across the state to participate in the biobanking and epidemiologic environmental research projects, et cetera. So not all of the core facilities are set up to serve multiple institutions, but most are, and that's increasingly an important criteria for review. The second question is much harder, and I think it's the opportunity in front of us, and that is how to accelerate the realizing the benefits of Texas innovation into commercialized space. And many of these core facilities are poised to do that. We just talked with Dr. Rosenfeld about how that might continue to be fostered through the seed awards in the product development program, et cetera. But getting those into impact on the majority of patients with cancer in Texas who are not participating in clinical trials remains, I think, a challenge for all of us. And the Clinical Trials Network Award and the Participation Award are first steps, not first steps, but steps toward helping to identify mechanisms that may move that forward. I think that this continue to be a challenge as well as opportunity.
Thank you, Jim.
Yeah.
Mr. Montgomery.
Thank you, Mr. Margot. Dr. Wilson, thank you again, as usual, customary, excellent presentation. My question relates to the very first set of awards. You had the Regional Excellence Awards. Those, it takes a long, long time to build even a program, much less an institution that is, superb in its practices. Are those awardees eligible for renewed grants over time? In other words, look, here's what we've done. We are now going to build on this, as we've seen with other CPRIT grants.
Yes, absolutely. Not only are they eligible, but they are also participating in other mechanisms that CPRIT offers. And hopefully this mechanism will help accelerate that by building a larger group of investigators. And then secondly, the TREC Award is imagined to actually have the opportunity for a second renewal to help continue that momentum.
Great. Thank you very much.
Any other questions?
Chairman?
Oh, Dr. Hernandez.
Yes. Good morning. And first of all, I apologize for being late. I was working, but thank you for having me. I wanted to thank the chairman and of course, Dr. Wilson and Wayne. You've done an exceptional presentation and job here. It's very diverse. I agree with you. And it looks like we're finally at the onset, looks like that we're starting to diversify what we do for all Texans throughout the state of Texas. And I'm glad to see Rice University there and others that are being awarded initial awards. And I hope they take advantage of it, of the generosity of Texas CPRIT program, so they can really be innovative and contribute to the overall effect of what CPRIT's goals are. But I'm very optimistic and excited to see these awards come through. It's good to see more MD researchers because they're very hard to come by, as you pointed out, Dr. Wilson. And it's great to see all this recruitment coming out of the United States to Texas as well. So I'm very excited. It looks like it's going to be a very promising year for us. So keep up the great work. Congratulations, sir.
Any other questions? All right. Mr. Burgess has certified compliance for the Academic Research Award process. It is my understanding that Oversight Committee member, Dr. Craig Rosenfeld, has reported a conflict of interest with two academic research applications, RP 210140 and RP 210208. Are there conflicts of interest that members have not already reported? Members, you have the list of applications and grant amounts recommended by the PIC for the Academic Research Grant Awards. We will approve the PIC's recommendations if 2/3 of the Oversight Committee members agree. There are 8 academic research award slates constituting 62 grant recommendations. Rather than taking a separate vote on each grant mechanisms, I will ask for a vote to approve all the slates. If a member wants to consider one or more award recommendations separately from the vote on all the slates, please make a motion to do so now. To accommodate Dr. Rosenfeld's conflict of interest, we will first take a vote. We will first take a vote, the 2 grant applications. He has noted his conflict of interest. Okay, I will entertain a motion to approve the PIC's recommendations for for RP 210140 and RP 210208.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing approval from at least 2/3 of the members present and able to vote, the motion carries. I again note for the record that Dr. Rosenfield did not vote. Moving on to consideration of the applications with no conflicts of interest, I will entertain a motion to approve the PIC's recommendations for the following academic research grant award mechanisms: Early Clinical Investigator Awards, Core Facility Support Awards, Clinical Trials Network Awards, High Impact, High Risk Awards, Texas Clinical Trials Participation Awards, Texas Regional Excellence in Cancer Research Awards, recruitment of first-time tenure track faculty members, and recruitment of rising stars.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing approval from at least 2/3 of the members, the motion carries. I will entertain a motion delegating contract negotiation authority to the CEO and CPRIT staff and to authorize the CEO to sign the contracts on behalf of CPRIT.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Now I'll turn it back to Dr. Wilson for the proposed fiscal year 2022 and fiscal year 2023 RFAs.
Thank you. The academic research program, based on discussions with our advisory committees, as well as constituents across the state, thinking about the discussions that we just had, really point to the importance of these 4 proposed RFAs, which are a continuation of ones you just considered: the Core Facility Support Award, High Impact, High Risk Research Awards, Early Clinical Investigator Award, Clinical Trials Network Award, and Texas Regional Excellence in Cancer Award. I'll point out that particularly for the Clinical Trials Network Award and the Texas Regional Excellence in Cancer Award, these were new mechanisms this year, and we're recognize that there is a learning process with potential applicants and interaction with our review process, and we're providing these unsuccessful applicants opportunity to come back to apply for these types of awards if you so approve, with critiques and also information that help them actually become more effective in making their case for competing for these 2 new awards. The other 3 are important continuation of programs that have proven track record to date. And these are presented for those of you are following this with your free materials on page or section 4 of the meeting announcement book. So recommending these 5 proposed RFAs to the Oversight Committee for your consideration.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson. Members, closing out our action items for the academic research program, I will entertain a motion approving the proposed fiscal year 2022 and fiscal year 2023 RFAs as presented by Dr. Wilson.
So moved. Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. The chair recognizes Mrs. Magid to provide the Chief Prevention Officer's report and present the PIC's Prevention Award recommendations.
Good morning, members. The prevention program update is behind tab 5 of your meeting books. As part of the update, I'd like to say that applications for the first cycle of FY 2022 are due in a couple of weeks on September 1st. Are there any questions about the update as in your book? If not, I'll move on to the cycle 21.2 applications for your consideration. These can be found on page 61 of the proposed grant awards booklet. The PIC has recommended 9 projects totaling $11,396,581. And note that one of the recommended projects was deferred from cycle 21.1. 4 different mechanisms are represented, and all of the recommended applications address at least 2 of the prevention program priorities. And I will now give a brief presentation of the recommended awards. The first slate is the evidence-based cancer prevention services slate, and 1 project is being recommended from this slate is to Texas Southern University for breast cancer screening, and predominantly for eligible African-American women, but also other ethnic minority women. If you approve this award, it would be the first prevention award for Texas Southern University. The next slate is the expansion of cancer prevention services to rural and medically underserved populations. And these you're familiar with. There are successful projects that continue to expand throughout the state. The PIC is recommending 2 very successful projects for expansion. The first one is to the University of Texas Medical Branch at Galveston, Dr. Abby Berenson, and this is an HPV project, vaccinating medically underserved women, and this project will be expanding to the border counties, Hidalgo and Galveston, but also to Cameron, Matagorda, and Wharton counties. The next project is the one that was deferred from cycle 1. It is a expansion of cervical and colorectal cancer screening and follow-up to Baylor College of Medicine, and they will be working with the Harris Health System and other safety net providers and all of their clinics. And in addition, they'll be expanding their outreach to particularly the Vietnamese community, but others among other communities as well. The next slate is the tobacco control and lung cancer screening slate. 3 projects are being recommended by the PIC. One of these projects is new and the other 2 are expansions. The first project is an expansion for Dr. Keith Argenbright from the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center. And this project will be expanding lung cancer screening across 26 rural and underserved North Texas counties. This would be 8 additional counties from the previous project. The second application is to Dr. McKnight of the Texas A&M University System Health Science Center. This is the new lung cancer screening project, and it's focused on the Brazos Valley area, and they'll be working with St. Joseph Regional Health Center to provide both low-dose CT scans and tobacco cessation intervention. The third project, next slide, is to Baylor College of Medicine, to Dr. Zurab. It's an expansion of their very successful lung cancer screening project, and they'll be working with 29 clinics in metropolitan Houston and 2 counties in Southeast Texas, where the prevalence of smoking tobacco use is quite high. It's the highest in the state. The fourth and last mechanism is the dissemination of CPRIT-funded cancer control interventions. These are the projects that are 2-year projects that put together products that can be disseminated to other areas of the state for implementation of successful programs. The first is to the University of Texas at Austin, Dr. Michael Pignoni, for the FIT testing, colorectal cancer screening testing in underserved communities. And this project works mainly with federally qualified health centers. The second project is to Dr. Lorraine Reitzel of the University of Houston. It's taking Texas tobacco-free, very successful project that we've funded, and concentrating on those Texans who are experiencing homelessness. The last project for your consideration is to Baylor College of Medicine, Dr. David Poplack, and it is focusing on their Passport for Care. It's a web-based clinical decision support tool, and they're concentrating on this application with on Latina childhood cancer survivors, using mostly a cell phone, mobile phone application. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Are there any questions for Mrs. Maggie? Dr. Rosenfeld?
Just a really sharp question. Would it make sense, or is there any plans to include COVID vaccinations in these type of programs, since cancer patients are at increased risk of complications from COVID? I'm not aware that COVID causes any cancer, but I may be behind the times. But it does seem to people on chemotherapy do seem to experience worse COVID symptoms. So I was just wondering if that should be incorporated into any of your programs.
It is in its own way. It's several of the projects. In fact, many of the projects, they don't actually provide the COVID vaccinations because they cannot use CPRIT funding for that. However, they navigate patients to any needed vaccinations, including COVID, and they've provided lots of materials to educate patients. And so it's part of the patient navigation system for several of our grantees.
Thank you.
Mr. Montgomery, do you have a question?
Do not.
Okay. Oh, if there are no more questions, turning to the prevention award recommendation, Mr. Burgess has certified compliance with the prevention award process. It is my understanding that no members have reported any conflicts of interest. Are there any conflicts of interest that have not been reported? Members, you have the applications and grant amounts recommended by the PIC for the prevention grant awards. The Oversight Committee will approve the PIC's recommendations if 2/3 of the members agree. We will consider the 4 slates together unless an Oversight Committee member wishes to take up any recommendation separately. I will entertain a motion to approve the PIC's recommendations for the following mechanisms: tobacco control and lung cancer screening, expansion of cancer prevention services to rural and medically underserved populations, evidence-based cancer prevention services, and dissemination of CPRIT funded cancer control interventions.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Hearing approval from at least 2/3 of the members, the motion carries. I will entertain a motion delegating contract negotiation authority to the CEO and CPRIT staff, and to authorize the CEO to sign the contracts on behalf of CPRIT.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Moving on to agenda item number 9, Dr. Walker Peach, will you provide the product development program update and introduce the PIC's grant award recommendations for product development research grants?
Good morning, members. Happy to be here. Thank you for your time and service to CPRIT. You will find the product development research report behind tab 6 in your meeting book. My report will consist of 2 topics. I will give you first an update on our current and future review cycles. And then my second topic will be a recommendation from staff on a grant matching policy recommendation change. So let me begin with the first slide, please, Rosemary. We have one cycle that we've launched in 2021, that's cycle 1. These were RFAs that were previously approved by the Oversight Committee last year prior to the COVID pandemic impacting our schedules. But we were successful in launching this program, this particular cycle in this year, and we will be bringing the recommendations forward here in just a few moments. So these are our standard RFAs for product development. These are probably very familiar for y'all at this point. The Texas Company Product Development Research Award and the Company Relocation Product Development Research Award. These are both for early stage companies. The difference is one is Texas companies are already in the state of Texas, and company relocations for companies that are outside of the Texas willing to relocate to Texas. They are both 3-year awards with a top line of $20 million. A more recent addition to our portfolio, our RFA portfolio, is the SEED Award. We're on the 4th cycle now for SEED. These are much earlier, very nascent spin-up companies, typically that are in Texas, but we've had a couple that have applied from outside of the state or now willing to relocate, and they're much smaller awards, $3 million, but the duration is the same, 3 years. So these were the 3 that were launched for 21.1. And if I may have the next slide, please. These are the application data by the particular mechanisms for this cycle. So you can see that we had 35 applications for this cycle, 8 Texco applications, 6 Relo applications, and 21 SEED applications that initiated and completed peer review. At the end of peer review, now we have 2 that we'll be bringing forward to you for a recommendation. They happen to both be Texas companies already located in the state of Texas, and the total budget request will be $27,565,207. So I will be speaking more about these two recommendations after my update report is concluded. So I want to move on next to the next slide, please. We launched again. I'm happy to report we'll be back on 2 cycles this year. 22, we'll have cycle 1 and cycle 2. We launched cycle 1 for 22 very recently. We launched that in June of 21. And we again launched all 3 of our standard RFAs. And may I please have the next slide? We've just very recently closed the portal for this application. We have received 12 applications at this point for cycle 1. There may be, they are currently undergoing administrative review. That number may change. Currently it's set at 12 and just around $92 million in ask from the 12 applicants. We will be bringing forward any recommendations from this cycle at the February 2022 Oversight Committee. We will also launch a second cycle in 22.2. And our anticipated dates for that is to open the portal in November of 21, close in January 22, and then a year from now, in August of 22, we'll be bringing forward the recommended awards for your consideration. So that concludes the update portion of for the cycles for product development. Let me pause there and see if there are any questions on this part of my report.
Are there any questions? Continue.
Thank you. May I have the next slide, please? I want to move now to the policy, the matching funds policy change recommended. And you will find that memo from myself and Kristen Doyle on page 6.4 in your meeting packet. This is a memo that requests a change with the way we handle matching funds right now for our company applicants. So by way of some background, our current policy was established in 2017, and that current policy is first-time awardees are required to have a 1-to-2 match. What does that 1-to-2 mean? 1-to-2 means the first dollar, 1, is from the company, and 2 means the second $2 are from CPRIT. So that is our current policy for all first-time awardees. For every dollar that they request from CPRIT, they also need to have a match component of $1. Okay, Second time awardees, that the match changes from 1 to 2 to 1 to 1. So that means that for every $1 they request, they also have to have $1 in match available for their project. Third time awardees were not really, and anything past third time awardees were not really contemplated in that early policy and our current policy, something we'll be dealing with later on today. But that is our current policy. So why are we thinking about changing the current policy to something new? And that was kind of the introduction of the seed award mechanism in 2019. The change as recommended will make it more equitable, kind of level the playing field, so to speak, for second awardees to these very early starting nascent companies. So by way of an example, and let me just kind of talk about what the recommendation is, and then we'll get to the example. The recommendation is to change the way we do the match component. We originally did this by the number of awards, just straight up number of awards, which made sense when the top line awards were $20 million, and those were the only two mechanisms we had. But now we have a seed award mechanism where the top line is 3 million, up to 3 million. So our recommendation is to change from the number of awards to the total dollar amount combined between awards. So what that would mean for a seed company, for instance, is they would come to us with perhaps in this theoretical example, a $3 million award, and they're under the current rules, they get a 1 to 2 match. But then if they return to CPRIT, let's say they did a fantastic job, they came back to CPRIT with their product, and they went for a Texco award, which we recommended, and that was a $15 million award. They, because it was a second award, would go straight to a 1-to-1 match, versus a Texco Relco applicant that asked for an $18 million award right away and would get a 1 to 2 match. That's under our current policy. If we change our policy with the Oversight's approval, that would then change to a total dollar amount, which would mean the seed awardee for a $3 million and a second award at $15 million would have the same match as a Texco Relco at 1 to 2. So the final recommendation, and that's kind of in the center part of the slide there, is to link the amount of required matching funds to the total dollar amount of the awards committed to the company instead of linking it to the total number of awards. So the recommendation is up to $20 million in total over all awards would have the standard 1 to 2 match, which is what we currently do. Anything over $20 million would in total be a 1-to-1 match requirement. And anything greater than $30 million in total, and this is something new, would be a 2-to-1. In other words, the company would have to have $2 for every dollar that CPRIT commits in order to support their project. So that is the staff's recommendation to make this change to the matching fund. Let me pause there and see if there are any questions on this as well.
Any questions on this? Go ahead.
Okay, so that is the conclusion of my update. And I would like now to move on to our award recommendations. You will find them in your award book under page 77. You will also find in the proposed grant awards book, the letter from the chair of the review council for project.
Cindy, I'm sorry to interrupt, but does the previous memo need any action?
I think all of the actions will be at the end of my presentation.
All right, thank you.
I believe. So so let's leave that on that slide. Just wanted to point out that our recommendations can be found again in the proposed grants awards booklet on page 77. Also includes my memo, my recommendation memo, the letter from the chair of the review council, as well as information on our 2 proposed awardees. So let's have the next slide. Here is our first recommendation for award. Dielectric Therapeutics. This is DP 21005. The title of their award is Clinical Development of DT2216. That's their lead compound for a first-in-class APTAD for cancer therapy. The maximum award budget is $14,449,638. This is a drug development company that is headquartered in Dallas, Texas. The underlying technology was developed by the scientific co-founders from the University of Arkansas and the University of Florida. They have a very interesting drug candidate, DT-2216, which selectively induces cancer cells to degrade themselves, essentially. It stimulates cancer cell death, or in the case of small cell lung cancer, weakens the cancer cells to the point where they are much more susceptible to chemotherapy. They have two initial disease indications, T-cell lymphoma and small cell lung cancer. The use of funds will be for scaling up manufacturing as well as entering into phase 1 and phase 2 clinical trials for this particular lead compound. There were no contract contingencies recommended by our review council. And of particular note here, this company was a recipient of a previous seed award, a $3 million seed award, DP 2018. We're very happy to report this is the first seed awardee recommended for a subsequent Texco award. And I'll pause and see if there are any questions on this particular recommendation.
Any questions? There are none.
May I have the next slide, please? This is the second award we are bringing forward for your approval. This award, it goes to, if approved, would go to Marker Therapeutics, Inc., DP 210042, efficacy of a multi-tumor associated antigen-specific T-cell therapy in AML patients following allogeneic stem cell transplants. Quite a mouthful. Proposed budget, $13,115,569. This is a drug development company also headquartered in Houston, Texas, and it is a Baylor College of Medicine spin-up. It is a publicly traded company on the NASDAQ. Their technology, their lead compound, MT-401, is a novel T-cell therapy that targets multiple tumor-associated antigens, thereby minimizing the ability of the tumor to escape the therapy. Very important work. The disease indication is acute myeloid leukemia. The use of funds is to advance their phase 2 clinical study and support registration. And there are no contract contingencies requested by the review council. So with that, these are the two award recommendations. These represent a total budget request of $27,565,207. And that concludes my update and award recommendations.
Okay, any questions? All right, Mr. Burgess has certified compliance of the product development award process. It is my understanding that no member has reported a conflict of interest with the proposed product development award recommendations. Are there any conflicts of interest not reported? Members, you have the application and grant amounts recommended by the PIC for the 2 product development research grant awards. The Oversight Committee will approve the PIC's recommendations if 2/3 of the members agree. We will consider the 2 proposed awards in one vote unless an Oversight Committee member wishes to take up the recommendations separately. I will entertain a motion to approve the PIC's recommendations for product development research awards to Dialectic Therapeutics and Marker Therapeutics as presented by Dr. Walker Peach.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing approval from at least 2/3 of the members, the motion carries. I will entertain a motion delegating contract negotiation authority to the CEO and CPRIT staff and to authorize the CEO to sign award contracts on behalf of CPRIT.
So moved.
Second. Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion carries. Members, Mr. Roberts notified the board on August 13th that he seeks authority to disperse grant funds in advance to the 2 companies we have just approved for awards. Are there any questions for Mr. Roberts regarding this request? Pursuant to the General Appropriations Act, Article 9, Section 4.02A, do I have a motion to authorize CPRIT to disperse grant funds via advance payments to Dialectic Therapeutics and Marker Therapeutics upon execution of the award contracts and the successful completion of tranches?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Turning to Dr. Walker Peach's recommendations to change CPRIT's matching funds policy for product development grantees that have received more than one grant award. Is there a motion to approve the change to CPRIT's matching funds policy for companies that have received multiple product development awards as outlined by CPRIT's Chief Product Development Officer?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Members, we will take up the final discussion point under the Product Development Program agenda item regarding the revenue sharing terms proposed for Onco Nano at the end of this meeting in closed session. The chair recognizes Mr. Graves to present CPRIT's internal audit report and the fiscal year 2022 audit plan.
Thank you and good morning. Appreciate you having me here today. If you will look in tab, I believe it's tab 7 of your report, we have our internal audit report for you. We are working on wrapping up the few audits through the rest of this month and into September of the last audits from the audit plan. This morning, I have to present to you the proposed internal audit plan for fiscal year 2022. As a reminder to the Oversight Committee, we do have an annual report that is due in accordance with the Texas Internal Audit Act. It is due to be filed with the SAO, the Governor's Office, and the LBB on November 1st of this year. And as part of that report, we have this audit plan that has to be included in that report. And so we are presenting to you today from our updated risk assessment that we conducted with management earlier this month, the draft internal audit plan that we will be able to include in that annual report. The audits that we have proposed are vendor contract compliance and a strategic alignment and roadmap with TAC 202. Texas Administrative Code 202 is the IT code that governs all Texas state agencies. And so this would be a larger scale IT audit to complement the IT audit that we are finishing this year, along with wrap up and follow up on existing any internal audit follow up from open findings from prior internal audits. And so that is the content of the fiscal year 2022 plan. Any questions?
Are there any questions? Is there a motion to approve the fiscal 2022 internal audit plan?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. The chair recognizes Mr. Roberts to present his appointments to the Scientific Research and Prevention Program committees.
Thank you, Mr. Margot. I appointed 4 experts to CPRIT's academic peer review committees. CPRIT statute requires the Oversight Committee to approve these appointments. The nominations subcommittee discussed the appointments at its meeting on August 13th and recommends approval. I request your approval. They are summarized for you on page 8-2.
Are there any questions for Mr. Roberts or the nomination subcommittee? Is there a motion to approve Mr. Roberts' 4 appointments to the Scientific Research and Prevention Program committees?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Members, at our last meeting, 4 of our advisory committees presented their annual reports for our consideration. I will recognize Dr. Wilson to present Dr. Kent Osborne, Chair of the Clinical Trials Advisory Committee, to present the last of the annual reports for FY 2021. After Dr. Osborne's presentations, Mr. Roberts will present new advisory committee appointments and a proposed schedule for the advisory committee's annual reports in fiscal year 2022. Dr. Wilson.
Dr. Osborne is the Tina and Dudley Sharp Chair in Cancer Research at Baylor College of Medicine and a celebrated physician scientist whose contributions to both laboratory and clinical research have led to major innovations and successes in the management of breast cancer. In addition, he was the founding director of the Dan Duncan Cancer Center at Baylor, achieving comprehensive designation under his leadership in 2015. And he has recently stepped down from that position and is now the founding director of the Cancer Center. He continues an active lab and clinical practice, and as well, Dr. Osborne has been a member of and past chair of the CPRIT University Advisory Committee and currently serves as the chair of the CPRIT Clinical Trials Advisory Committee, a committee he helped CPRIT to initiate and has led the development of the new Early Clinical Investigator Award and Clinical Trials Network mechanism that you heard discussed earlier in response to CPRIT's identifying access to impact clinical trials as a priority. Ken, thank you for joining us today to present the Clinical Trials Advisory Committee report.
Thanks, Jim. Let me share my screen if I can here. So the Clinical Trials Advisory Committee membership is shown on this slide. And it represents a pretty good distribution across the state. I'm the chair of the committee from the Dan Duncan Cancer Center at Baylor. Ruben Mesa from San Antonio and the Mays Cancer Center is a member. Carlos Arteaga from the Simmons Comprehensive Cancer Center at UT Southwestern. Gail Eckert at the Livestrong Cancer Institute in Austin. David Hong at MD Anderson. Pat Reynolds at Texas Tech. Ray Tabibiazar represents the company component, and Ronan Kelly from Baylor, Scott and White at the Sammons Cancer Center there. For the past fiscal year, we had two meetings, one in March of 2020, where we reviewed the two RFAs that we put together earlier, the one on Early Clinical Investigator and the other on Clinical Trials Network Awards. The second meeting was in June of this year, when we reviewed the submission data on the RFAs, discussed various issues related to the two RFAs, and then discussed the composition of our annual report, which I'll now show you. So first, it's just to review the rationale for the RFAs that we sent out. One, first, was the area of precision cancer medicine, which, as you probably know, is treatment for an individual patient based on the specific genetic mutations driving their tumor. In other words, there's not one treatment that fits everybody. Everybody's tumor is slightly different based on the mutations that cause it. There are thousands of different potentially targeted mutations and hundreds of new drugs targeting them that are in development. So to get all that studied in a reasonable period of time, we need more centers and more clinical trial investigators to carry out these clinical trials. And finally, access to new drugs in clinical trials is limited currently to the major centers, usually in urban areas. There's poor access for those in rural or underserved areas. The committee came up with the following principles that we recommended for these RFAs. First was to increase access to clinical trials for patients in outlying areas and the underserved. It was a competitive RFA process, as you know. Early phase trials, particularly phase 2 trials that can be completed quickly, were the focus. Investigator-initiated trials derived from work in a Texas laboratory would receive the highest priority. We hope to have efficiency and speed to approve these trials. We would necessarily partner with industry, who has most of these drugs, and we would provide personnel and infrastructure to smaller hospitals to allow them to carry out clinical trials. And finally, with the new Investigator Award, provide support and protected time for new clinical oncologists to develop their careers in clinical investigation. So there were two RFAs, as you know, the Clinical Trials Network Award, which was released in September 2020. 5 were submitted. I guess only 1 was funded, so we've done something not quite right there. And secondly, was the Early Clinical Investigator Award. It was released in September 2019. There were 8 submitted and 4 funded. And then released again in August 2020, 11 submitted. I didn't count the number, but quite a few were funded this year, just now. First, let's discuss the Clinical Trials Network, the design of which was to increase access to clinical trials and carry out more clinical trials. We propose to create a clinical trial network. We'd have the hub and spoke model with major research institution and LI partnering with outlying and our underserved hospitals, network hospitals. We would provide resources to the lead institution to administer and coordinate a network, and more resources to the network hospitals to create functioning clinical trials infrastructure. The thought was it would eventually merge into a Texas clinical trials network. Since only 1 was funded, that's going to be a little bit difficult, at least at the current time. Here's the idea. On the left is a lead institution, perhaps a cancer center that has a lot of experience and a lot of trials to offer. They would then partner with a network hospital shown in dark blue. It's important to realize that the network hospitals also serve even smaller hospitals adjacent to them or in their areas where patients come to them for once they're diagnosed with cancer. So the idea was we would provide some money to the lead institution and some money to the network hospitals to enable the network hospitals to work with the lead institution to carry out clinical trials. The metrics of success would be the number of patients screened for a clinical trial and accrual from these remote areas. Satisfactory performance on quality assurance and quality control and audits would be necessary. Training and participation of the network hospital with the lead institution clinical trial support unit. Ability to enroll patients with molecularly defined subsets based on the patient's genetics of their tumor. And finally, referral of patients with more sophisticated study or treatment requirements to the lead institution. The committee addressed and discussed several different issues or concerns. First, there are 4 NCI cancer centers and none in West Texas. There are 2 in Houston, 1 in Dallas, and 1 in San Antonio. Secondly was the geography in West Texas. Cities are small and they're far apart, making it difficult for patients to access even a hospital that might be in their area. Third, medical oncologists in practice face challenges that may limit their participation. Fourth, there are many non-hospital-based practices, that is, oncologists give the treatment in their own office, not in the hospital that they hospitalize their sickest patients at. So where would the money go? Would the money go to the hospital or go to the private practice office where they do the clinical research? That's still an issue. Fifth would be competition among hospitals and oncologists in a given area. Texas Oncology is a private practice group that practices in all areas of Texas. They do have a few clinical trials. The question would be whether they would work, if they worked in a hospital that was awarded these funds, would they work with those funds or not? And finally, it's too early to judge. I can say one thing, that somehow the institutions like mine, because I responded to the RFA, interestingly, which I wrote most of, and didn't get funded. So we're too early to judge, and we got to figure out what went wrong with all the other applications. So the future plan with this regard would be to create a statewide Texas clinical trials network. We would link the lead institutions and their networks together. We would be able to do larger and more sophisticated trials emanating from labs in Texas and industry. And this might be through an administrative supplement. The second RFA was the Early Clinical Investigator Award, the idea of which would be to increase the number of clinical trial physicians to help do all the trials that need to be done. The rationale for this are that physicians interested in clinical investigation are declining. Interested oncologists don't have time. That's the primary reason. Hospitals and medical schools are requiring the doctors to see more and more patients, and to generate so-called work RVUs, relative value units, not giving them time to even do clinical research. Oncologists are attracted to private practice, where they have higher salaries. New oncologists lack the opportunity, interest, and or proper training for clinical research during their fellowship, which focuses on clinical care of cancer patients. And all in all, the shortage of these physician scientists will impair clinical trial and translational patient-oriented research in the future. So the RFA was sent out with the idea that this would be funding clinicians in their first 3 years after completing fellowship training. It would award $300,000 per year for 5 years. They would have 50% protected time with no clinical responsibilities during that time, so they could focus on developing their clinical trials and their careers. The funding would provide for training, laboratory correlative studies, and support for clinical trial. There would be a maximum of 2 applications for each institution. The issues and concerns for this RFA were that, number one, it's a new program, too early to judge. However, we thought that it was an essential program to grow expertise in this area. The focus was to be on early clinical investigators, not physician scientists like me, who also have a laboratory. That was my major focus. I did some clinical trials, but my major focus was in the lab. We're talking about clinical investigators here whose main focus is in clinical trial research. The amount of funding may be too high, we thought, in some cases. 1.5 million for 5 years. We thought that maybe we could consider more awards with less money per award as something to think about in the future. Perhaps load the award to give more during the first 2 to 3 years and less during the last 2 to 3 years of the 5-year award. The 50% protected time may be too much in the later years of the award, where the investigator's laboratory is actually in the clinic. And maybe the investigator should spend a little bit more time in the clinic during those last couple of years. Or we need to better describe in the RFA that the protected time could be used to recruit patients in the clinic to clinical trials. And finally, the clinic is the laboratory of clinical investigators, if you know what I mean. So the conclusions of our committee: the Clinical Trials Advisory Committee recommended 2 programs to augment clinical trial research and to expand access to cancer trials to more remote areas of the state. It's too early to determine success. Some changes to the RFAs might be considered in the future. Understanding the dynamics of cancer patient care and access to clinical trials throughout the state is crucial for success. Thank you, and I'll stop there and answer any questions if I can.
Are there questions for Dr. Osborne?
I have a question, Chairman.
Dr. Hernandez?
Yes, good morning. Look at your presentation. So I just want to make sure I understand this. You recognize that there's 4 NCI cancer centers, but none are, of course, in the West, and we knew that already. And some, I don't think there's some in the South either, to be honest. Also, when you in your funding mechanism, I see your predicament, because we need these people to have protected time. And I'm trying to understand the logic, how you would, first and foremost, why in the first years, I think it's page 13 for us, the proposal too, when you fund these people, why first years and the 50% protected time with no clinical responsibility? That's important, because we know that if you guys are working with the private sector, you're right, they need to generate the work RVUs to fulfill their employment requirements. But if we want all these clinics throughout the state of Texas to participate, we do need that protected time. So I'm glad you're recognizing that. I don't know about the funding, as you pointed out, that maybe it's too much, maybe it's not enough. I think it is a little too early to determine that, because really it's in the product that comes out at the end of the day. If we're spending 1.5 million for 5 years, and we're getting, and you're the one that set the metrics, and you're getting volumes upon volumes of patients who are participating in studies, and you're getting great analytics out of it, I think 1.5 is very maybe a little too small, but we're going to find out. And the other question I really had is, how do you determine when somebody has a protected time in their clinic? Do you guys go out there and audit to see what they're doing? Or is there a timesheet? Or how do you know what protected time is being implemented?
First of all, I think there might have been some confusion.
Yes,
The
sir.
1.5 million over the 5 years was for the network award. Not,
Okay.
not for giving physicians protected time.
Okay.
The other award, the Young Investigator Award, was for the protected time. And yes, when a new doctor comes to town or comes to the center,
Yes, sir.
they work out a schedule. They
Mhm.
have to go to a certain number of clinics per week, for instance. So if they're going to be a pure clinician, they
Yes,
wind up spending 80% of their time usually seeing patients in a clinic.
Mhm.
And that allows them 20% of the time for teaching and maybe doing a little bit of research. It's not enough time to really learn how to do it in the first place, learn how to do clinical trial research, and giving them enough time to develop their career in that area. That's why the 50% protected time.
Okay. And do you guys provide the audit to make sure they're doing that 50% protected time, or what's the mechanism for us to ensure they're doing it?
Yeah, well, we would just have to assume that they are. I guess we didn't have a mechanism for auditing that, but
Okay.
we would take the school at its worth and say, at its word, and say that if they have the 50% protected time, then that's what they're doing.
Yes, sir. Because in some of the private organizations, and even I know in universities, you have to have timesheets. You have to demonstrate you're not overlapping, you're stacking multiple contracts for a physician, right? Because you get into a compliance problem. But you want to be sure they're actually doing the work they stipulate that they're being.
Sure, absolutely.
Right. So, anyways, okay. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Dr. Rosenfeld, do you have a question?
Just a quick question on your slide regarding accrual on the clinical trials. I just have a quick question. Is accrual on the cancer clinical trials increasing, decreasing, or staying the same? And the reason I ask this is, as I read through JCO or blood, it looks like there's more and more clinical trials that are larger and larger. And so it just appears that more people are going on clinical trials, but maybe that's deceiving.
Yeah, I think it depends. I would say, first of all, for decades, only 4% or 5% of all cancer patients in this country go on clinical trials. So it's a minority of the patients. And those patients are usually patients in the urban area at a cancer center or a similar type institution. So very few patients in the whole go on clinical trials. Secondly, now with the new idea that patients are treated not uniformly, but based on their own genetic makeup, that has changed things dramatically, because now instead of putting all of your estrogen receptor positive breast cancer patients on the same trial, asking whether this drug works or that drug works better, now we're subdividing that group into smaller and smaller subsets based on the genetics that they have. And so an ER positive breast cancer patient, you can really divide those up into probably 5 or 10 other groups based on the genetics of their tumor. And so these are smaller and smaller trials and more drugs to test. So that's the problem now, is that there's so many more drugs. Drug companies are developing drugs against all these different gene mutations. And there's simply not enough investigators and not enough hospitals to test all those agents in an efficient manner.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Osborne. The chair recognizes Mr. Roberts to present the presiding officer's new.
If I could interrupt you, Mr. Margot.
Yeah.
First of all, I really want to thank Dr. Osborne. For those of you who aren't aware of it, he has given years of service to this agency, absolutely invaluable advice and counsel. And he also, in addition to chairing this group, participated in our Chief Scientific Officer interview committee and was instrumental in helping us wade through some very qualified candidates. So Kent, as always, thank you. Thank you to Baylor College of Medicine for sharing you with us, and we hope to continue the relationship going forward.
Thanks, Wayne, and congratulations on the new scientific officer.
Let's see how that goes.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you again, Dr. Osborne.
Thank you.
The chair recognizes Mr. Roberts to present the presiding officer's new appointments to CPRIT's advisory committees and the proposed schedule for fiscal year 2022 advisory committee reports.
Yes, sir. Thank you. At its August 13th meeting, the nominations subcommittee discussed presiding officer Margot's proposed appointments to the advisory committee on childhood cancers and the product development advisory committee and recommends your approval. The three appointees are on page 917 of your meeting book. In addition to that, on page 933, Mr. Margot had requested recently a revised 2022 schedule for the annual reports that each advisory committee presents to you. The new schedule appears on page 9-33 in the meeting book. We will use the proposed schedule to prepare future oversight committee meeting agendas. The schedule is, of course, subject to change as dictated by future events. I recommend your approval for both items.
Are there any questions for Mr. Roberts? Is there a motion to approve the 4 new appointments to the advisory committees?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. The chair now recognizes Mr. Roberts to present the fiscal year 2022 honoraria policy.
Thank you again, Mr. Margot. Behind tab 10 is the memo that describes the honorary policy. We have to do this every year according to our law. I have developed this policy for your review for the peer review services. You approved this 2021 honorary policy, the current policy, last August. The proposed 2022 honoraria payment structure and amounts remain exactly the same as those you approved in 2021. I do request your approval of the 2022 honorary policy. This policy was discussed with each of the subsidy program subcommittees.
Are there any questions for Mr. Roberts? Is there a motion to approve the fiscal year 2022 honoraria policy?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The chair recognizes Mr. Roberts to present the Health and Safety Code Section 102.1062 waivers for fiscal year 2022.
Thank you, sir. Behind tab 11, you will find 4 memos requesting waivers for Don Brandy, CPRIT employee, Dr. Hellerstadt, the Department of State Health Services Commissioner, Dr. Jim Wilson, and then a generic one for the review councils. These waivers are identical to ones that you have approved previously. The specifics of each are identified in the individual memos. They can, of course, at any point in time be rescinded or altered by you. I request approval of these 4 waivers.
Are there any questions for Mr. Roberts? Is there a motion to approve the 4 proposed Health and Safety Code Section 102.1062 waivers for fiscal year 2022?
So moved.
Is there a second? All in favor, vote aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion carries.
Thank you, members.
The chair now recognizes Ms. Eckel to discuss the proposed administrative rule change.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The final order is located behind tab 12 of the meeting book. You just have one rule amendment to chapter 703 presented for final adoption today. The amendment was first presented at the May Oversight Committee meeting and subsequently published in the June 4th edition of the Texas Register, as well as published on CPRIT's website. We did not receive any public comments. So the next step would be, if approved by the Oversight Committee today, to send the final order to the Secretary of State for final adoption.
Are there any questions for Ms. Eccles? Members, is there a motion to approve the final order adopting the rule change to the Texas Administrative Code 703?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Chair recognizes Ms. McConnell to present the Chief Operating Officer's report.
Good morning, members. Thank you. And you've had my report under tab 13. I'll just highlight a few things in the report. We did receive deposits of about $131,989 in the third quarter and another $62,000 in June and July. So total deposits for FY 2021 of almost $262,000 have been put into our interest and sinking fund. And that brings the cumulative total of payments that the agency has received year to date to almost $5 million. Also, with respect to our debt issuance, we issued our final tranche for this fiscal year on August 12th through the Texas Public Finance Authority. And so that brought our total for the year to $260.3 million. With respect to the service contract renewals, there are some contracts that are below the $100,000 threshold that do not require Oversight Committee approval. And I just bring those to your attention that we are renewing 4 different contracts. One of them is an interagency contract with the Health and Human Services Commission, but the others are with outside vendors. And finally, I had an update on the State Auditor's Office audit of our grant management processes. And we should be receiving a draft report today from the auditors. And then we will have 10 days to review the findings and develop management responses to that and provide those back to the SAO, and they'll incorporate that into the final report and then issue the final report. So that is more to be continued, but it is imminent from all of the information that I have at this point. Before I move on, I'll stop there and see if there are any questions over any of the information in my report. Yes, sir.
Ms. McConnell, do you expect any surprising news from the state audit?
I don't. They did provide us with a sample list of items that could potentially be findings. There was, I mean, you know, they're going to find something. So, but it wasn't particularly troublesome. And again, not everything was a finding. It was, you know, a list of maybe a page or so.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. McConnell? Okay, moving to the next agenda item, Ms. McConnell, will you explain the recommended contract approvals?
Mr. Margot, do you want me to go through the, there was a second memo in the tab 13 on the closed grant award balance de-obligation?
I don't have any, you can go through that if you want.
Okay.
That's fine.
This is the first time that we've actually brought this to the Oversight Committee, and this is in Texas Administrative Code rules that the Oversight Committee adopted, that any contracts that are terminated with funds that are unspent at the time of termination, those funds are considered de-obligated. So we did put together this report because this is the first year, FY 2021, that we are utilizing deobligated funds with respect to supporting particularly the grant awards that you have approved. And with respect to that, the totals that I have there are from closed grant years 2010 through 2014. And again, 2014 is not all of the grants are closed, but the majority are closed. And the obligated balance is a little, almost $85 million. We are using 60 million of those funds to apply towards the grant awards approved by you during fiscal year 2021. And the remaining balance may be applied to future funding years. But also, as I mentioned in the memo there, we do have unbudgeted draws from ERS for benefits to retired employees, both from our agency as well as the Department of State Health Services Texas Cancer Registry, since we are the funding source for the Texas Cancer Registry through the Appropriations Act. So because of that, again, these are unbudgeted, so it doesn't reflect in our budget. It doesn't reflect in ERS's budget. It doesn't reflect in DSHS's budget. And so the money is literally pulled from our account. So to have some cash there to buffer that is a good practice. And those amounts have grown over the years. It started out in 2010 at about a little over $10,000. The estimate for this fiscal year, and since we haven't finished, I don't have a total, an actual total, but it's roughly $380,000. So the amounts have grown significantly, and they do fluctuate from year to year. There is no standard pattern, and it's just whatever ERS has to draw to support those benefits. And I did actually receive a question from Mr. Montgomery about the information that's provided, particularly in the Excel tables that follow. If there are any patterns that I've noticed with respect to the deobligation of unspent funds from the grant awards, and there really isn't. In 2010, we had some fairly large awards that they ended for various reasons, and so we had significant balances left. And even in 2014, we had some unusual circumstances with a large product development award that actually was terminated early, and I think they had to repay some funds, and that was due to various reasons. And similarly, there was even like a recruitment award that it was a $2 million recruitment award and only extended about $400,000. So, that fairly large balance was left. So there isn't really a true pattern. It's just, things have happened, and you can see how much it has varied from year to year as far as what has remained unspent from those awards.
So the reason, one of the reasons for my question, Ms. McConnell, thank you very much, is in asking about a pattern, really then the question is, if there is a pattern, should we change any of our processes? Is there something that we or the grantees are not doing that results in unspent funds? And I guess the answer is no. We're doing, it's through no process that we end up with extra money. It's just the vagaries of different systems. The recruit didn't come, the drug didn't work, something like that. Okay.
That's correct.
Thank you very much.
Are there any other questions? Greg, are you asking a question?
Yep, I'm just not stretching.
Okay.
Just a quick question. This may be coming up later, Heidi. Is there going to be any update on the CPRIT biannual meeting?
No, not really. We are in the process of procuring a meeting planner. And then from there, we can move forward with procuring a venue and so on. So I don't really have an update other than that.
Do you have idea of when it would be?
We are hopeful that we could actually have a conference in the fall of 2022 in Austin, provided that, some of the venues that are normally not available may be available when we go out for bid. So, we'll just have to see, but that would be the ideal time.
All right, well, thank you.
Okay, there are no action, members, there's no action required on this. Hopefully you saw the 13.1312 is where this was referenced. We're going to move on to the next agenda item. Ms. McConnell, will you explain the recommended contract approvals?
Yes, thank you. So we have 4 contract renewals, which exceed the $100,000 limit that requires your authorization. I think that they're with ICON Clinical Research, HAN Public Communications, the Perriman Group, and Weaver and Tidwell is listed there. Again, they are renewals, so you're familiar with these contracts. The one additional note in there about the outside counsel service contracts requiring your authorization for a possible contract that would not exceed $125,000. That is no longer needed. It appears that as they are working through the procurement process, the team that has been reviewing the proposals that have been submitted are probably going to award 2 separate contracts that will not exceed, neither of which will exceed $100,000. So it's only the 4 contract renewals that you really have to consider. And I will be sending out with these renewals, and then with the other renewals that I notified of you of in my Chief Operating Officer report. I will be sending out a financial disclosure request to you to verify that there are no conflicts, so we can proceed with contracting.
Members, this is tab 14, if you didn't see it. Are there any questions for Ms. McConnell? Members, is there a motion to approve contracts with the Perriman Group, Weaver and Tidwell, HAN Public Communications, and ICON Clinical Research?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion carries. Moving on to the next agenda item, the subcommittee assignments for fiscal years 2022 and 2023. Members, you have the proposed subcommittee assignments behind tab 15. I have noted the member that will chair the subcommittees with a red X. We are moving the responsibilities originally assigned to the nomination subcommittee to the board governance committee in fiscal year 2022. I have included a revised board governance subcommittee charter that reflects the new duties. Are there any questions? Members, is there a motion to approve the new subcommittee assignments for fiscal years 2022 and 2023?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion carries. Members, is there a motion to approve the proposed changes to the board governance charter?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. The next agenda item is officer elections. The nomination subcommittee met August 13th and unanimously recommended the following slate of officers to serve 2-year terms ending in August 2023. Dr. Mahendra Patel as presiding officer, Dr. David Cummings as vice presiding officer, and Cindy Payne as board secretary. The chair makes a motion to approve Dr. Mahendra Patel as presiding officer, Dr. David Cummings as vice presiding officer, and Cindy Payne as board secretary to serve the Oversight Committee for fiscal years 2022 and 2023. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion carries. I do want to add to this that the transition will be much easier and simpler than it was probably under my transition from Mr. Montgomery, who did not want to relinquish power. I'm going to take up agenda
Actually,
item
Mr. Margot, if I could interrupt, if you will recall, back when there was the transition of power, you made fun of Mr. Montgomery's gavel, to which we provided you with one that was even smaller, which I believe was totally fitting, given the situation. But as the presiding officer, and of course, along with Kristen and I, want to acknowledge working with you as CEO of the agency, Kristen as deputy. We meet with the presiding officer on an ongoing basis, and you have been an absolute joy to work with. To commemorate your service, I'm going to we are providing you with another little gavel that we will provide to you when we appropriately get together next time. But on behalf of the staff and me personally, thank you, Mr. Margot, for your service. And we look forward to working with Dr. Patel.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. And it was always a pleasure to succeed Mr. Montgomery. And
Well, let me just say there's been a constant improvement over the past 2 years, and I look forward to even more improvement in the role of presiding officer.
Yeah,
it's one of the
Mr.
few
Montgomery,
cases in which the passage of time does indicate the evolution of the human species.
Yeah, it's also nice to move up intellectually to Dr. Patel.
Yes.
All right. I'm going to take up agenda item number 23 out of order. The proposed dates for the Oversight Committee's regular quarterly meetings and subcommittee meetings for fiscal year 2022 are in your meeting packet behind tab 18. The next regular Oversight Committee meeting will occur on November the 17th. Is there a motion to approve the proposed meeting dates for the regular meetings of the Oversight Committee and the subcommittees for fiscal year 2022?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Before we go into closed session and in my waning hours as presiding officers, I would like to take this opportunity to recognize CPRIT's Chief Scientific Officer, Dr. Jim Wilson. This is Dr. Wilson's last meeting as Chief Scientific Officer. He has been a remarkable advocate for the academic research program and for CPRIT's mission. I know that I speak for my colleagues on the board and for CPRIT staff that we will miss him and his tremendous work on behalf of Texas. We have put together a short program to convey our appreciation for his 5 years at CPRIT. This starts with a short video.
Jim, it's been a delight to work with you. I've learned a lot from you, your demeanor, the way you handle things, and your engagement in our review process. I could tell you were enjoying a lot of the sessions that we had. And what I would really want to do if you were here, and maybe if I wasn't actually in my office, is raise a glass of single malt to toast you on a highly successful CPRIT career.
Thank you for all that you did at UT Southwestern, and thank you for all you did at CPRIT. The people of Texas are better off for your work.
I'm very thankful for the example of your work, your demeanor, your patience, and your professionalism, and it has meant so much to me, and just appreciated the chance to work with you through all the different things we've been through the last 5 years.
Jim, I don't know what you have planned for this next chapter in your life, but I know it's going to be great, and I wish you the very best going forward.
Jim, thank you so much for everything that you've done for Texas and for MD Anderson.
Thank you for what you've done at UT Southwestern. I wish you many years of a happy and healthy retirement.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson, for allowing our foundation to work together with CPRIT in launching Researchers Roundup.
What we're trying to achieve in Texas through cancer research could not be done without the credibility of people like Jim, who lead the way and attract those other researchers for us. So I believe he helped personify what we're all about at CPRIT and trying to do.
Dr. Wilson's role in guiding the creation of the liver cancer cap has allowed me and my team to work on clinical research for the community of persons at risk for liver cancer. I am really grateful for the support that Dr. Wilson and CPRIT have given to us.
Jim led CPRIT in a way to help fulfill some of that empty space for research funding, has really helped Texas become a leader in this area. So I wish him well in his retirement or whatever he's going to do now. And I hope I'd be able to call upon him if I need to in the future.
I love you for who you are, and what you mean to me. You mean a lot to me, Dr. Wilson. And even though he will say that, call me Jim, to me, you are always going to be Dr. Wilson. It is to respect you and for what you've done. And what you've done to me personally is to show me how to lead in a different way. That leadership capability you've given me, Jim, I will never forget it. I'll always remember it, and I will always honor you.
I have here before me a proclamation by Governor Abbott honoring Dr. Wilson, and I would like to read part of it. As Governor of Texas, it is my honor to congratulate you as you celebrate 17 years of dedicated service to the people of Texas. You never failed to lead by example during your time with the Cancer Prevention and Research Institute of Texas, with the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center, and as a practicing oncologist. Your unparalleled work in oncology, specifically in the genetics of colorectal cancer, has rightfully earned you national acclaim and has helped save countless lives while also inspiring the choices of countless others. Your accomplished career has been marked by your commitment to excellence in your field and by your devotion to the people and patients with whom you work. I thank you for your many contributions to the state of Texas. Your commitment and dedication highlight the best of the Lone Star State. Greg Abbott, Governor of Texas. You will be getting a copy of this, Jim.
Thank you.
Mr. Vargo,
Yes.
may I just say I'm overwhelmed and so touched, but also greatly appreciate the opportunities that I had. It's a privilege, and most important, to thank the members of this Oversight Committee for your support, but more importantly, your dedication to moving forward better cancer management and opportunities for our Texas citizens. So thank you. And Wayne and CPRIT colleagues, thank you. This was just quite wonderful and greatly appreciated.
Well, Mr. Margo, in your waning hours, you kind of dropped the ball there. Before Jim spoke, I was hoping to get in a few words on behalf of myself and the staff. Although today we have a rough idea of your departure timeline, Jim, I certainly hope it'll never be a total break. It's a cliche to say that your contributions to CPRIT, cancer science, and me personally are immeasurable, but they are. You are a visionary. You built 2 cancer centers, Case in Cleveland and Simmons at Southwestern. These accomplishments required an ability to come in, see the possibilities, and make it happen. You continued this vision and resolve at CPRIT. You have a superb taste in science and scientists. You see opportunities, know how to bring folks together, and how to capitalize on these opportunities. As such, you are the consummate collaborator. You make 1 + 1 = 3. You are thoughtful and tolerant of diverse approaches. These engender trust and leadership. You are always on point and on target, unflappable, even in times of stress. As CPRIT's director, I most appreciate your ability to communicate at all levels. You are a great communicator. You tell the truth and you make decisions quickly and transparently. You not only relate to the greatest minds in cancer research, but also explain the importance of a project to the lowest common denominator, which is usually me, in a non-condescending manner. You are not afraid to be specific, sometimes understated, sometimes to the point where one must be ready and listen closely or we might miss it. You can use understatement to poke fun. I've been the target of a few of those zingers, but you use them to emphasize a point and never to cause hurt. You are the epitome of the phrase, a gentleman and a scholar. You are a true joy. Thank you for sharing your talents with us. Now, Mr. Margot, take it away.
Well said, Mr. Roberts. Well said. Are there any other members who would like to make any comments?
Thank you, Dr. Wilson. I don't think there's a way to express it better than Wayne already has. So I just want to emphasize that what he said. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Ambrosio, do you want to say something? You're muted.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me now, sir?
Yep.
All right. Dr. Wilson, it's been a pleasure working with you. A short time, but I really enjoyed our interactions, and honestly, Wayne could not have said it better. You truly will be missed on many levels, but we really appreciate your contribution to the state of Texas and CPRIT, and wish you nothing but success. And don't lose contact. We need you here. Please don't forget about us. Best of luck, sir.
Anyone else? Thank you. I'll be happy to join anybody with a single malt with you, Jim, as well. So please let me know when. Members, we have a resolution prepared for Oversight Committee action. And to cap off this presentation, I'd like to read a resolution for action by our Oversight Committee. Whereas James K.V. Wilson, MD, has served as the Chief Scientific Officer of the Cancer Prevention and Research Institute of Texas since March 1, 2016. Whereas Dr. Wilson works selflessly for and on behalf of CPRIT, giving his time, reputation, wisdom, expertise, and energy to extend lives and improve the health of Texans. And whereas Dr. Wilson earned the respect and admiration of the Oversight Committee, his CPRIT colleagues, and the greater cancer research community through his leadership of CPRIT academic research program. And whereas Dr. Wilson was instrumental in the passage of Proposition 6 in November of 2019, ensuring an additional $3 billion to accelerate the momentum in the state's historic fight against cancer through the next decade. Whereas Dr. Wilson provided steadfast guidance to the cancer research community and CPRIT during the unprecedented challenges presented by the global COVID-19 pandemic. Whereas Dr. Wilson faithfully performed the duties of his position with equanimity, persistence, and poise. And whereas CPRIT's mission of promoting academic research, prevention, and product development research progressed under Dr. Wilson's guidance and leadership to the benefit of all Texans. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Oversight Committee of CPRIT hereby recognizes James K. V. Wilson, MD, for his distinguished service to the citizens of the state of Texas, and expresses its gratitude for his many and lasting contributions to CPRIT. And be it further resolved that an official copy of this resolution be prepared for Dr. Wilson as an expression of high regard by Oversight Committee members and CPRIT staff. Is there a motion to approve this the honorary resolution?
So moved.
Second. All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Congratulations, Jim. We will miss you. You know, you provided, CPRIT is so unique that most members of our state, most of our population, it's kind of like I felt like I had to do as mayor of El Paso, is explain who we are and where we are, because we're still without the outside of the research community, the medical profession, we're still not as well known for what we're doing. And you help promote that across this state. And for that, as a member, I'm very grateful. And the state of Texas is very grateful. So we congratulate you and wish you well. So I guess, Kristen, are we supposed to move into executive session?
Yep, we're all ready to go to item number 9 and item 19.
We will now take up agenda item 19 regarding the chief scientific officer position for discussion in closed session. I also want to call up the discussion we left pending under agenda item number 9 related to the Onco Nano award contracts. For the members of the public watching this meeting, other than potential action related to these two items, we have reached the end of our agenda. While you are welcome to stay on the video for your planning purposes, I do not expect to take up other items after returning from closed session before adjourning the meeting. We go into closed session pursuant to Texas Government Code Section 551.074 to discuss matters regarding to the chief scientific officer position and the Texas Health and Safety Code Section 102.107B to discuss issues related to managing, acquiring, or selling securities or other revenue sharing obligations. The following CPRIT staff shall join the Oversight Committee in closed session: Mr. Roberts, Ms. Nelson, Ms. Doyle, Dr. Walker Peach, and Ms. Davies. The time is presently 11:25 Central Time. Pursuant to our discussion.
So at this point, members, you will sign off this Zoom conference. The closed session will take place under the link that I sent you in the email yesterday.
So we leave this meeting.
Leave this meeting.
Okay. The board now reconvenes in open session and the time is approximately 12:13 Central Daylight Time. Pursuant to our discussion in closed session, is there a motion to set the exempt salary for the chief scientific officer position to the legislatively authorized $608,850 effective on or after September 1st, 2021?
So moved. Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion carries.
Thank you, members.
If there is no further business and there are no objections, the chair moves to adjourn this meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you all. See you in November in
Thank you
person.
all.
In person, Rice. In person. Okay.
10-4.
Okay.